161. Justice and Authority. Chalcedon Report number 109, September 1974. According to Norman Zakur in An Introduction to Medieval Institutions, the idea that where there is no justice, there is no authority was firmly entrenched in feudalism. Thus, despite the common violations of law, there was a principle of justice in terms of which judgment and progress were possible. With Niccolò Machiavelli and then Thomas Hobbes, a new idea began to develop, one which John P. Roche in Courts and Rights summed up as holding in effect that law is the command of the sovereign, whether the sovereign be the ruler, parliament, or later, the people. For some time, these two ideas, however contradictory, coexisted. Rulers and people were, in varying degrees, Christian. They believed in common ideas of right and wrong, and they were agreed as to what justice means. As a result, the sovereign's law was still, to a large degree, tied to an essentially biblical framework. This framework was entirely subject at first to the ruler's choice. The people were Lutheran, Catholic, Episcopal, or Reformed in terms of the ruler's choice. His word was law, and his religious preference was the people's church, and no other legal choice was possible. The result was the development of civic religion, a religious foundation for a purely national state or for the ruler's state. The god of the state was the ruler's choice and the ruler's supposed ally. The belief of the rulers was that God should be grateful to the king for keeping the realm in the camp of the church, whatever the true church was held by the king to be. Thus, in 1706, after the defeat of the Battle of Ramillies, Louis XIV said, "God seemed to have forgotten all I have done for him." As time passed, however, this civic religion became less and less concerned with theology and church, and more concerned with maintaining the bare bones of biblical morality. A nation was held to be God-fearing if it had an occasional prayer and Bible reading at official and educational functions, and vaguely upheld a minimal view of the Ten Commandments and a few other things. Even this minimal civic religion declined to the point where the regents of New York composed, as Roche noted, a non-partisan prayer essentially addressed to whom it may concern for daily recitation in the public schools. Then this prayer was invalidated in 1962. Since then, civic religion has become even broader. In 1965, unbelievers who were pacifists gained the right to affirm and maintain with civil sanctions a totally private religion as the basis of their morality. Meanwhile, the old feudal idea that where there is no justice, there is no authority, was revived in terms of Thoreau and Bakunin to give a moral basis to civil disobedience. A key problem of the modern era was thus brought into sharp focus. The foundations of all law are, in essence, religious and theological. They are questions of ultimacy and moral necessity. Law without faith is an impossibility. Every law order is a moral and a theological order, a structuring of society in terms of a fundamental faith. If the faith dies, the law order dies also. Earlier centuries had insisted, erroneously, on identifying faith and the church, limiting the faith to a particular form of the church. Later, the faith was identified with the state, and now with the purely personal tastes of the individual, for whom the faith is existential, not something beyond man, but totally of man. The consequences of all three positions have been destructive of social order and of Christian faith. To make either the church, the state, or the individual the voice of God is to limit God and absolutize the human order. The old pagan Roman maxim was, "What pleases the prince has the force of law." To reduce the law to an institution or person is destructive of law, and that law, then, is tyranny. If ultimate law comes from man, or an agency or institution of men, then I have no appeal against its arbitrariness, except my personal dislike and dissent. I have no religious or moral stand against the law. If I have an appeal to supernatural and ultimate law against all that man may do, then I have a basis for resistance and for reconstruction. Because relativism has so long prevailed, men no longer affirm as a society any faith in an absolute right and wrong. The result is an erosion of the idea of the rule of law and the normality now of the rule of political pressure. Kant reduced law to a humanistic moral imperative. Every formula which expresses the necessity of an action is called a law. But where is the necessity in the modern point of view? It was clearly formulated in the 1960s by the hippies, thus, do your own thing. Necessity is no longer cosmic. It is no longer a part of the essence or nature of reality. It is entirely personal and anarchistic. The result is a breakdown of the very idea of law. Increasingly, there is neither justice nor authority. When such a situation prevails, darkness settles in, because there is no light of justice to illuminate society and to give authority. The psalmist's words stand confirmed. Except the Lord build the house, they labour in vain that build it. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain. Psalm 127, verse 1.